That's him? The ex-convict. I heard he just left prison this morning. Poor girl. Her life is over. I wanted to scream at them. I wanted to tell them that I didn't choose this. That I was here because I had been forced. I looked to my left and saw my stepmother, Mrs. Evelyn, sitting proudly in the front row, a satisfied smile on her lips. Beside her was her only daughter, Mariah, my stepsister, who was almost glowing with joy, as if she were the bride instead of me. Mariah leaned toward her mother and whispered loudly enough for me to hear. She's finished. Completely finished. The day I married was the day my dreams were buried. The smell of old flowers filled the air. The church was silent, except for the creaking of the wooden doors as I walked in. My white dress was secondhand, the lace slightly torn at the hem, and my shoes pinched my toes. I had imagined my wedding day 1,000 times, but never like this. Never with my heart in pieces. Never with my groom brought in by the police. Everyone turned their heads as 2 officers walked him down the aisle. His hands were free now, but the faint red marks on his wrists told me where the handcuffs had been just minutes ago. He wore a plain, faded suit that looked like it belonged to another decade. His hair was slightly messy, his jaw shadowed with stubble. Some women in the back gasped. Others whispered loud enough for me to hear. That's him? The ex-convict. I heard he just left prison this morning. Poor girl. Her life is over. I wanted to scream at them. I wanted to tell them that I didn't choose this. That I was here because I had been forced. I looked to my left and saw my stepmother, Mrs. Evelyn, sitting proudly in the front row, a satisfied smile on her lips. Beside her was her only daughter, Mariah, my stepsister, who was almost glowing with joy, as if she were the bride instead of me. Mariah leaned toward her mother and whispered loudly enough for me to hear. She's finished. Completely finished. My stomach tightened. They wanted this. They wanted me married to this man because they thought it would destroy me. 2 months ago, I overheard my father arguing with Mrs. Evelyn in their bedroom. The door was slightly open, and I had gone upstairs to ask for my school fees. Evelyn, you don't understand. My father's voice trembled. If we don't pay the money we owe, the loan sharks will. Mrs. Evelyn cut him off sharply. I understand perfectly. And I have a solution. A rich man has offered to pay everything on one condition. I held my breath. What condition? My father asked. That his son marries your daughter, she said, her voice laced with something that didn't feel right. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. My father hesitated. But his son just came out of prison. People say too much, she interrupted. Do you want to keep your daughter's dignity, or keep your family from being homeless? Choose. It was silent for a moment. Then my father sighed heavily. If it's the only way. I backed away from the door, my legs trembling. I couldn't believe it. My own father was going to give me away like a debt payment. It was a Sunday afternoon. The smell of jollof rice filled the kitchen, but I had no appetite. My stepmother called me into the sitting room. My father sat there too, looking pale and uncomfortable. Mrs. Evelyn didn't waste time. You will be getting married in 2 weeks, she said. I stared at her. Married? To who? Her lips curled into a smile. To the son of a very important man. Don't bother asking his name. Just know that the marriage will save this family. I turned to my father. Papa, is this true? He couldn't look me in the eyes. It's for the best, Nia, he said softly. We're in trouble. This will solve everything. Tears stung my eyes. So you're selling me off? Mrs. Evelyn's smile widened. Don't be dramatic. You'll be doing your duty as a daughter. And besides, she glanced at Mariah, some of us are lucky enough to choose who we marry. Mariah giggled. I stormed out of the room, but deep down, I knew my protest meant nothing. In this house, my voice was just noise to them. Now, standing at the altar, my mind kept replaying those conversations. The police had delivered my groom to the church just an hour ago. They said his sentence had ended that morning. When he stood beside me, I caught a faint scent of soap, as if he had just showered for the first time in a long while. His expression was calm, almost unreadable. The priest began speaking, but his words were a blur. "Do you, Nia Adebayo, take this man?" My lips trembled. I wanted to say no. I wanted to run. But the memory of my father's tired eyes and the threats of the loan sharks flashed in my mind. If I refused, my family would be ruined. "I do," I whispered. The priest turned to him. "Do you take this woman?" "I do," he said firmly, his voice deep and steady. It sent a strange shiver through me, not of fear, but of something I couldn't name. When the ceremony ended, people clapped politely, but I could hear Mariah laughing quietly behind me. The reception that wasn't. There was no grand party. No music. Just a small table in the church hall with a plain cake and bottled drinks. My stepmother didn't bother to hide her smirk as she congratulated me. "Well, Nia," she said sweetly, "enjoy your new life. Though I doubt it will be much to enjoy." Mariah added, "Maybe prison food is better than what you'll have." They laughed together, not caring who heard. I felt my new husband's eyes on me, but I didn't look at him. I didn't want to see pity. I didn't want to see judgment. Leaving the church. As we stepped outside, the two police officers who had escorted him earlier saluted him, not mockingly, but with a strange kind of respect. It confused me. Why would they show respect to a man fresh out of prison? We got into an old car that looked like it had been repaired 100 times. He opened the door for me without a word. As we drove away, I glanced back at the church. My stepmother and stepsister stood on the steps, waving like they were sending me to my funeral. And maybe they were. I sat in silence, my hands in my lap, wondering what kind of man I had just married. Wondering if my life was truly over, or if this was the beginning of something I couldn't yet understand. I thought I married a man with nothing, but that night, one small thing told me I was wrong. The car ride was quiet, except for the sound of rain hitting the roof. I sat with my hands folded in my lap, staring out the window, trying to keep my tears from falling. He didn't say a word. After about 30 minutes, we stopped in front of a narrow building with faded blue paint. Rust clung to the balcony rails, and the steps looked like they might break under too much weight. "This is home," he said simply, unlocking the door. Inside, the apartment was small, one bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a living room with a single old sofa. The light flickered weakly when he switched it on. "This will be your room," he pointed toward the bedroom. "I'll sleep in the living room for now." I nodded, feeling a strange mix of relief and awkwardness. Later that night, after I'd changed into a simple nightgown and tried to settle into bed, I heard his voice from the living room. It wasn't loud, but it was firm, deep, and strangely confident. "No, the stock numbers are wrong," he said into the phone. "Tell them I'll review the final proposal myself before it goes public." I froze. "Stock numbers? Proposal? Also," he continued, "push the meeting with the Hong Kong partners to next week. I don't want it clashing with the board meeting." I frowned, my heart beating a little faster. Why would a man who had just left prison be talking about board meetings and partners overseas? The conversation ended, and I heard the creak of the sofa as he lay down. When I stepped quietly into the living room, he was already pretending to be asleep. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe he was helping a friend, maybe it was just talk. But deep inside, I knew. This man was not what he seemed. My stepmother said my stepsister married a prince, but the Real King was already in my house. 2 months had passed since my wedding, and I was still learning how to live in that little apartment. My husband, whose name I'd finally gotten used to saying, Daniel, kept to himself most of the time. He left early in the morning, came back late, and never spoke much about where he went. One Saturday morning, Mrs. Evelyn called me to the family house. I had a feeling it wasn't for anything good. When I walked in, the sitting room was filled with guests, laughter, and the smell of fresh cake. Mariah, my stepsister, stood in the center wearing a sparkling gold dress, her hair perfectly styled, her smile wide enough to split her face. Standing beside her was a tall man in a neatly pressed suit. He was handsome in a polished way, with a gold watch that gleamed under the light. "Meet David," Mrs. Evelyn announced proudly. "My son-in-law." I forced a polite smile as David shook my hand. His grip was soft, but his cologne was overpowering. He works at the central bank, Mrs. Evelyn continued, her voice dripping with pride. A well-respected man with a good income. Not like, she let her eyes slide over me, certain people who have nothing to offer. The guests chuckled. Mariah glanced at me and smirked. They're having their engagement party tonight, Mrs. Evelyn said, looking at me as if daring me to be jealous. It's good to see a young woman marry someone worthy. I stood there, my cheeks burning, but I said nothing. I knew if I spoke, I'd only give her the satisfaction she wanted. The dinner table gloating. During dinner, Mrs. Evelyn couldn't stop bragging. Mariah will never have to worry about rent, she said loudly. She'll have a beautiful home, a secure future, everything a woman could want. Mariah smiled sweetly at David. We're even planning our honeymoon in Dubai. I swallowed hard. My honeymoon had been me unpacking in a dimly lit apartment while Daniel quietly fixed a leaking pipe in the kitchen. As the night went on, I felt Mrs. Evelyn's eyes on me every time someone mentioned money, travel, or success. When the evening ended, she pulled me aside near the door. I hope you're happy in your little life, she said softly, though her words cut like glass. You could have had more, if only you were worth more. Back at the apartment. That night, Daniel came home late. I didn't tell him about the party. I didn't want him to know how much it hurt, or how small they made me feel. But as he changed into his nightclothes, I noticed something, his cufflinks. They were gold. Real gold. The kind I had only ever seen in magazines. And his phone, when it rang, the name on the screen said board secretary. I looked at him, wanting to ask questions, but the words stuck in my throat. One day, I promised myself I would know the truth. They thought they'd embarrass me in public, but my husband had other plans. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon when Mrs. Evelyn called again. We're going shopping, she said flatly over the phone. Mariah needs new clothes for her honeymoon, and you can come along. It might inspire you to tell your husband to work harder. Her words burned, but I went anyway. Maybe some part of me wanted to see for myself what real happiness looked like to her. We met at Grand Royal Plaza, the kind of mall where the cheapest handbag could pay my rent for a year. Mariah was already there with David, her fiancé, and Mrs. Evelyn was buzzing with excitement. The subtle jabs. As we walked past glittering displays of jewelry and designer clothes, Mrs. Evelyn made sure every sentence was a jab. David, pick anything for Mariah. She deserves the best, she said loudly. Then she looked at me. Nia, maybe you can find something in the clearance section. Mariah laughed, linking her arm with David's. I stayed quiet, pretending to browse, but inside my chest, a small knot was forming. The unexpected entrance. That's when Daniel walked in. I hadn't expected him to be there, I thought he was working. He was dressed sharply in a dark suit that fit him perfectly, his shoes polished to a shine. He spotted me instantly and walked over. What are you doing here? He asked, his voice calm but warm. Just helping, I said quietly. Mrs. Evelyn's eyes flicked over him, her lips curling slightly, as if seeing him well-dressed didn't fit the image she wanted of him. Oh, Daniel, we're just looking around. This store is a bit pricey. Daniel looked at me, then at the display behind her, a necklace of delicate gold and diamonds that seemed to shimmer under the lights. Without hesitation, he said to the sales attendant. Pack that necklace for her, nodding at me. The shock. The room seemed to freeze. Mrs. Evelyn blinked rapidly. That necklace costs more than, she stopped herself, clearly calculating. Mariah stared, her mouth slightly open. David shifted awkwardly. Daniel didn't even ask the price. He pulled out a sleek black credit card and handed it to the cashier. The card looked expensive, like the kind you only saw in movies, the kind that didn't have spending limits. The sales attendant smiled respectfully. Of course, sir. Mrs. Evelyn's face twitched, caught between disbelief and the need to say something nasty. Well, that's generous, she managed. Daniel handed me the bag with the necklace, looking straight into my eyes. You deserve beautiful things. I felt my face grow warm. I couldn't tell if it was from his words, or from the way everyone else was staring. Leaving them behind. After paying, Daniel took my hand. Let's go, he said simply. We walked out of the store, leaving Mrs. Evelyn, Mariah, and David frozen in awkward silence. For the first time, I saw a crack in their smugness, a flicker of confusion, maybe even fear. And for the first time, I started to wonder just how much I didn't know about the man I had married.